Welcome to Elevate, practical content that inspires. I'm Valda Ford.
And I'm Rochelle Rice.
And we are committed to elevating the next generation of women in leadership. Our guest today is Johnny Campbell. Johnny is going to talk to us about embracing the winds of change. Adjust your sails. But first, let me tell you a bit about him. Johnny Campbell is a keynote speaker, author, and founder of Rise Up and Win International, an organization that helps people develop the mental readiness so they can embrace change and turn their products and services into profits. Johnny is the past president of the National Speakers Association for the state of Illinois. He is an accredited speaker, a designation presented by Toastmasters International and held by less than 100 professional speakers in the world, given for excellence in public speaking. Johnny is also a TEDx speaker. His talk is called How an Enemy Can Improve Your Life. I'm sure we would love to know that. And the author of The Agent of Change, How to Get People to Embrace Change Without Losing Your Mind or Your Bank Account. Rochelle, take it away.
Johnny, thanks so much for joining us today. You are well known as the Transition Man. Tell us a bit about your background and how you came to be called the Transition Man.
Well, that started because before I was a speaker, I spent over 10 years in the sexy and exciting world of insurance. And during my time in insurance, I was a part of 5 downsizings and mergers. And during that time, I got put into middle management where I was responsible for helping the people deal with the merger. In other words, how they were going to be embraced by the new culture, how they were going to use the new technology. And my job was to help people deal with all of this. I didn't have a roadmap, so I had to learn on the job change management. I didn't even know what change management was at first, but I had to learn how to help people deal with it. I saw they didn't like change, or at least they didn't like the word called change. So I started saying, let's not look at this as a change, but as a transition. And I will be your transition man. And that's kind of how I got the name, the Transition Man.
Well, that makes sense because when people tell us, well, you need to change, or so many times we're trying to get other people to change. But why is change so hard for so many of us?
Well, it's difficult for several reasons. One reason it's difficult because people have hurts, habits, and hangups that keep them from embracing the change. But then also, even before we get to that point, the idea of change is the part that's the problem. See, change is an event, situation, or thing, but not a person. People weren't designed to change. We are transformed by the experiences we have. And our transformation happens through our transition through the change. So the first issue is, what is change? And then the other issue people have is, how do I move through the change? Not be the change, but how do I move through it? And so that's what I focus on, helping people move through the change they're experiencing. But that's why it's difficult also.
Yeah, absolutely. Johnny, when we look at change, especially now during the COVID pandemic, I mean, many of us have been forced to change whether we like it or not. What are some of the interesting things you've noticed about change during this time?
It's really about a person's perception of the actual situation. See, when some people see change, they see opportunity and improvement. Mm-hmm. Some people, when they see change, they're paralyzed by it. And then when some people see change, they can be ruined by it. So it's a matter of how people perceive the change. But most importantly, when it comes to perception, the perception is based on how they see themselves, how they see the situation, and how they see themselves getting through the change they are experiencing. And that's why it's so difficult. It's because of how they see themselves. That's the issue.
So how do you think most people see themselves? Do they see themselves as someone who's stuck or someone who's afraid, or, I mean, give me an example of how people see themselves.
Well, a lot of people, when change occurs, they're already comfortable with the way things are. And when change occurs, their first instinct is to resist it because that's uncertainty. That is the unknown. So a lot of times people are just ready to resist and pull back. And so that's where it starts at, that resistance. And when people start to see the change coming, they don't always see the opportunity within the change. And so it takes someone outside of them sometimes to help them see where the opportunities are within the change.
Yeah, I like how you say that. And when you were talking about the different ways people see what's going on, do they embrace the change? Do they shrink away from it? Share with our listeners, if you would please, Johnny, your top strategies for truly embracing change.
Well, the first strategy is to get them to realize that they're not built to change. It's about transition. If your listeners would say it out loud, if they say the word change, then they say the word transition. If they say the word change, then they say the word transition. Which one sounds better? It is the transition sounds better, because that's what you were built to do, was to go to and through things and be transformed at the end of it. So when I talk to people or I help them, first we identify where they are, then we clearly identify where they're trying to go, and then I work on them with the transition piece. And inside of the transition piece, that's where the work is. And that's where we start to talk about, okay, what could be standing in the way? What are your values and beliefs about what's standing in the way of you getting through this? What can we put in place, training, education, to help you overcome what's standing in the way? Also, what are the possible rewards and benefits of reaching the other side of this change? And clearly identifying what those are. The transition is where it happens. It's not the change, because the change will just occur. That's why it's an event, a situation, or a thing. People have to go through it. And when you lead people, they have to know where they are, of course, where they're going. But that middle piece, that's where you have to help them say, okay, this is our true north. This is where we're going. And tell them this is what's in our way or what's in your way. And then you set goals to overcome what's in your way. That's what you set goals for. A lot of people set goals to win things, to achieve things. I encourage people to set goals to solve problems, because when you set a goal to solve a problem, you start looking for a solution to the problem. And when you're going through a change, that's what's happening to you. And so I just take them through this I'm a very pragmatic person when it comes to transition. And I just take them step by step through a process. And that's what people have to go through to get to the other side. And then when they're on the other side, they are transformed by the experience, whether it's positive or negative. And that positive or negative experience is what they use to decide on the next change that's coming at them.
Okay, well, that makes sense, because when I started off in academia, I was teaching at Creighton University in Omaha, Nebraska, and I thought, okay, teaching, that's cool. I'll be teaching about public health. I'll be teaching about diversity and social issues. And then I found that, okay, I'm teaching people who are remote. Now, this is many years ago. Now remote for everyone coming after these days would be just standard operating procedure. But back then, I expected people to come into my classroom and sit down, and I could look at them and they could look at me. But I had to learn how to use technology to get the students in the rural part of Nebraska. Because of 2 million people, only about most people live within 50 miles of Omaha, but the rest of the people were way out there. So I had to think through transitioning from someone who's going to stand in a classroom looking at people to looking at people through screens who were 500 miles away. So I had to learn some things. So for people who are trying to learn those kind of things, I mean, what's the first step? I mean, how do you even recognize all the stuff you have to do? Do you ask people? You search online? You find somebody like you who's an expert at transition to help them think through the process?
Well, a lot of times the first thing they have to do is really get clear. Like if you're going to help somebody, they really got to get clear on what they're trying to go. So when the change happens, you say to yourself, okay, from this change, what am I really trying to have happen in my life? What am I really going to try to have accomplished? So you always have to be clear about what do you want first. Mm-hmm. And then you look at the change and you start to see where within that change is your opportunity. And a lot of times, sometimes people can't see that for themselves. So they do have someone like me come along to help them get clear on what they are really looking for within the change that's now occurring. Mm-hmm. And so clarity is the first step of what do you want?
Mm. So Johnny, it's interesting because, of course, we're living in incredibly unclear times. And when I think about the next, 2 to 5 years or 3 to 5 years, let's say, what do you see as the landscape for change? I mean, like, what should we be on the lookout for? I mean, is this going to be a constant? I mean, I understand that what you do is for me, the individual, to work through the change. But what do you see as this, with some of the trends we might see about what's happening with change? This is going to continue, so you'll be very busy with your work. How do you see people hitting all of this change coming forward?
Well, I definitely see a massive amount of change occurring because of how our environment and landscape is shifting all the time. I try to encourage people. The uncertainty comes when they think too far out. I tell people to live in the now. Look at where you are right now and be conscious of what you're doing right now towards your future. But if you sit and think about what's going to be in the next, 4 to 5 years, that can become very paralyzing to people. And it creates a lot of uncertainty in their minds. So I encourage them to be present, be in the now, and think about, like, where am I trying to go right now? And then become more adaptable as new things come at you. Because if you're saying, this is like, if someone says, I want to go to college, and all of a sudden it's now all online learning. Well, that's okay. That's all online learning. The point is for you to make sure you're in position to go to college and to be present. I mean, like, I have to prepare myself for college right now so that as the new shifts occur, I can move accordingly. So I always talk about just being really in the now.
Mm. Well, that's really smart. Sometimes we we get ourselves in trouble looking too far ahead. But now, for a lot of people have a number of skills, and especially folks like us who are speakers, consultants, trainers. But how can they, in this environment, think about turning what they know and do? Since I know you and I and Rochelle, we've been road warriors. We've always been out there on the next plane, going to the next place, doing the next thing. Mm-hmm. How can people who are entrepreneurs turn their products or their intellectual property into products and services that will ultimately make them profits?
Well, one thing is to look at what you're doing. And a lot of times people as entrepreneurs don't really realize they may look at themselves as a whole. But I say unbundle your skill set and look at the individual things you do to build your business or to grow your business. And each of those individual skill sets now can become an online training or course that you can develop. A lot of entrepreneurs take for granted all the things they can do and all the things that they already do for their business. But in an online world, it's about unbundling everything that you do and saying, hey, there are people that might want to learn how to market, how to speak. There might be people who want to just learn how to develop products, and you already know how to do these things. Some people might want to have what you know as an online course. So it's about an entrepreneur unbundling everything. And then even in themselves, you yourself is a brand. So you might teach them branding skills or teach them how to create a brand out of what they already do. So to me, that's really the future of an entrepreneur, is to unbundle everything and be open to